Well, thanks to Kurt and thanks to Alex Tate from the Research Department for inviting me to the RIBA to talk about this today. I'm here to talk about BIM, or Building Information Modelling, and the remit for the talk I was given was Emerging Challenges. So I guess it might seem a bit of a tangent to go off and talk about Building Information Modelling, but hopefully what I talk about today will have enough sort of correlation with what has been talked about previously to show you some similarities between what I'm doing here with BIM and what's happening here with Archive. So I'll just see this. So there's three things, just three basic things that I want to talk about today. The first is just to, as I do all the time, give a quick introduction to what BIM is. The second is to say, possibly, that looking at BIM and looking at the ideas that have sprung up around building information modelling, it's not exactly a new thing, I would say, which for BIM people might be controversial, but I'm sure I'll probably show things that correspond to what you're doing already. So I'll talk a bit about some of the technologies that I've been looking at to look at the emerging challenges for BIM. And then finally, I'll just talk a bit about a brief case study that on UniClass, the Unified Classification System for the construction industry, which we've taken and we've made into a semantically enabled open BIM system. So just to talk about BIM, to start off with, I have to usually give an introduction to BIM all the time, but BIM stands for Building Information Modelling, or sometimes some people say Building Information Management. And really, all BIM is a set of procedures, processes, and technologies. So for collaboration and data sharing throughout the design process. So the types of data, again, that you share in a building information model. And I guess this diagram is the sort of generic way of looking at BIM, or the building information model, and the collaboration between the different disciplines that collaborate towards that model. So it can be anything from geographic information, spatial relationships, crowd flow, manufacturing details. But I think more importantly, and what I'll come on to, is that actually one of the important things that building information modelling formalises is the sharing and capturing of how this information is used throughout the process, using standards and protocols that are coming into use. And again, just to say that a building information model is meant to be used throughout the whole design process, so that from the building inception right through to whether you decide, actually, I do want to build this building or I don't want to build this building, right through to the facilities management guy at the end who wants to change a light bulb in the building or make the room less hot. So building information modelling, one of the things is, why do you need it? Well, I guess in the UK, a big thing, or a big impetus for it, is that the UK government has specified that it has to be used on all government projects over 5 million by 2016. So Francis Modd's statement, which you can find on the bimtaskgroup.org website, says the government's 4-year strategy for BIM implementation will change the dynamics and behaviour of the construction supply chain, unlocking new, more efficient and collaborative ways of working. This whole sector adoption of BIM will put us at a vanguard of a new digital construction era and position the UK to become the world leaders in BIM. So behind that is this rather plain document called the Government Construction Strategy, which was published in 2011. And the idea in the Government Construction Strategy, or the central tenet there, was to reduce capital costs and the capital and the carbon burden from the construction and operating of the built environment by 20%. And a key part of that was that collaborative BIM, with all project asset information, documentation and data being electronic, has to be used on projects over £5 million by 2016 by the government. So, but 2016, this has got to be implemented. But I guess one of the things is that we're already in 2013, sorry. 2013, so how far are we towards that goal? Well, if you ever have looked at building information modelling, you'll probably have seen this diagram. It's called the Buse-Richards diagram. If you haven't looked at building information modelling and you're going to, you'll become thoroughly sick of this diagram because it is in every single presentation that there is. But the idea of this diagram is to show the evolution of BIM, or building information modelling, towards level 3 and beyond. So the government has specified that level 2 is where people will get to by 2016. But level 2 being that every form of documentation, every model has got to be electronic and in some interchangeable electronic format by 2016. But where we are just now, I would have to say a bit of a cop-out and just say that we're somewhere there, or it's somewhere in that red box, and that's where. But that's really because there are sort of bleeding edge market leaders and bleeding edge companies who are possibly beyond that, but then there are people who are catching up. And one of the things that is, again, I said about building information modelling being about the protocols and standards, you can see that this has really been taken up by the UK construction industry in terms of the protocols and standards that have came out recently. So for instance, you have the UK government's PAS 1192 document, which is a specification for information management on building information models. You have Uniclass, which I've been involved in myself, which is the classification system for the construction industry. You have the RIBA, who have released the new RIBA Plan of Work 2013, which is possibly the biggest overhaul of the RIBA Plan of Work since its inception 50 years ago. And then you have a myriad of other documents from the Construction Industry Council, like the CIC BIM protocol here. One of the things I did put up quite intentionally was that I put up this image for Open BIM rather than BIM, or rather than building information modelling. And the reason for that is because being part of BRE, BRE run and manage Building Smart UK, which is a member organisation that interfaces with the government and industry to develop tools and training for building information modelling. But more importantly, Building Smart is the curator and the developer of open standards for use in BIM. So not proprietary AutoCAD formats or ArchiCAD formats, but the open standard for building information modelling. So what they do is produce, for these open standards, the how, the who, and the what, basically. The how is the IFCs, which are the industry foundation classes, which are a data exchange format for building information models. The who is the information delivery manual, so detailed specifications on the protocols that you should use for managing that information. And the what is the IFD, or the International Framework for Dictionaries, so the vocabulary or the ontology for what you should be, the terminology in building information modelling. And that's just renamed as the Building Smart Data Dictionary, which sort of ruined my slide because I had that nice diagram there. So one of the things I think with building information modelling is that the government has this set plan up to level 2, that everything has to be digital by 2016. But there's this area of level 3 BIM, which I guess you would say is a bit up for grabs, in that the thing that is in the government construction strategy about level 3 BIM is that it says our future vision for the delivery of this information is a fully web-enabled, transparent scenario based on Building Smart's IFC, IDM, and IFD standards. But that's as much as it says. So let's make of that what you will. But one of the things, bringing it back, I suppose, to the idea of what I've been looking at in terms of metadata, is that if you look at a lot of the standards that are out there and a lot of the protocols, what they do is they do not sort of, I guess, say that there's extra information or new information that building information models will produce, but they actually begin to accumulate metadata about how that information is used and the workflows and how that information is used. So for instance, in the PAS 1192 standard released by the government, you have the Common Data Environment, which really just tells you about how documents go through approved standards, how they go through verified, how they go to be verified documents, how models become verified. You have aggregation and provenance of information to get a BIM execution plan, which is one of the central things in the PAS document. But again, it's aggregating information and taking that information and metadata, accumulating through that information as it goes towards the BIM execution plan. And if you look in the document, you have the information delivery lifecycle, which basically is a life cycle of how the building information model progresses and how it develops. And again, as it goes around that life cycle, it accumulates metadata and it accumulates data about whether it's documentation, whether it's non-graphical data, whether it's part of the graphical model, even whether it's delivered to the client at each stage and what information they should get. So what I think, given that there are a number of groups in the UK who are looking at what BIM level 3 should be, one of my premises is that BIM level 3 is just the management of BIM metadata. Level 2 has the processes and the protocols for managing the data, but actually level 3 is about those processes and protocols and about how that data is used. The data from the processes and protocols is used to further enhance the models. So one of the things then is that if I take as my premise that building information modelling and going towards the future and the emerging challenges is that it's all about metadata of the model rather than recreate the wheel. What I did, I was look and see what else I could find in terms of metadata, and from my background in computing, I looked at the idea of taking this statement where level 3 is a fully web-enabled transparent scenario. I looked at the idea of Sir Tim Berners-Lee and the semantic web, and what he says is the semantic web provides a common framework that allows data to be shared and reused across application, enterprise and community boundaries. And other, Sir Tim Berners-Lee is the inventor of the World Wide Web as well. I guess that's a parent. But also he said, to sort of paraphrase that, he said in other forums, he said that the semantic web is the web done right. And the idea is that he looked at the semantic web and its implementation as linked data. And in his TED talk in 2009, he talked about linked data as the idea that every piece of data gets a unique URL or a unique ID on the web, and the data is there just the same way as you have a document on the data just now that you can read. You have data that's on the web at a unique ID or a URL, and that data can be read by a machine. And in 2009 there was I guess that one of the important things about that is that the data stays where it is, but the important thing is the links between the data become important, and the links often represent the metadata about that information that is that unique ID. So in 2009, the linked open data cloud looked like this, and in 2012, there's a slightly more of the linked open data cloud, and it ranges from geographic data to bibliographic data to UK government data to music data, and it's used in a number, or it's been implemented in a number of different formats and in a number of different disciplines. So for instance, the BBC Nature Wildlife website uses semantic web data. The UK government has a data.gov.uk platform. The Guardian are looking at semantic web and linked data. And the Ordnance Survey are looking at that for the representation of their data. And just as of September 2012, there were 31 billion pieces of information represented in this format, with 504 million links. And part of the UK government's investment is that their Open Data Initiative with the Open Data Institute is to invest 10 million over 5 years, and standards adopted by various large organisations. So what we've done, and I'll just show you a brief look at a case study that we did, was take the ideas of BIM and the ideas of level 3 BIM and opening that, take the ideas of the semantic web and linked data, and look at the classification system for Uniclass, which is a classification system which up until we looked at it was available in a hardback book, which you can still buy downstairs for 40 quid if you're interested. Or it was available just through who you knew that could send you a spreadsheet that they'd typed in, and they'd typed in bits of it. So what we did was take Uniclass, and with Alex Tate at the RIBA and Geoffrey McStutis from Central St Martin's, we went to CPIC, who are the Construction Project Information Committee, and they are the curators of Uniclass and the Common Arrangement of Work, which are used throughout the UK construction industry. And we started the BIM Gateway project. And the BIM Gateway project was to look at the idea that if you look at this Hughes-Richards diagram, or this wedge diagram, you can see that an extended version of it shows how standards and how classification systems and guides and the delivery methods should progress and should evolve as you go up that wedge, and as you up level 0, level 1, level 2 and level 3. So what we looked at was that if you have a classification system which is up to level 1, we thought, well, we'll look at semantic web techniques, and we'll look at making the classification system, the CPIC classification system, open and available in as many formats as possible and reusable, and hopefully fit for level 3 purpose. So what we did was take Uniclass and the Common Arrangement of Work, we moved it into an open data format, and we put that onto the web. And what we have now is that we have Uniclass and the Common Arrangement of Work available through an API as an open data repository on the web using RDF or using SCOS. We have a number of different formats that use that repository through the API. So we have it as a searchable tool, we have it as different visualizations, and we have it as a very, very buggy Android app if you wanted to try it. We also have that information available in as many formats as possible, so XML, JSON, just normal CSV files, and we're talking to Autodesk and ArchiCAD to make that data available in a format that they can read too. And if you want to have a look at it, we have a fully versioned repository at cpic.org.uk, where we store historical revisions and metadata about the terms, the revisions, the provenance of that data. We have an API, we have it downloadable as CSV, XML, JSON, and just as plain text. And we have been looking at a semantically enabled SCOS version of the Uniclass system. And the idea is that we're looking at this because we believe that that's towards the level 3 goal of BIM, which is integrated interoperable data. So again, you can go to cpic.org.uk/Uniclass2 and have a look at this system. And it's also available through the UK Government's BIM Task Group website. And just to summarise, I guess I talked today, probably looked a little bit at the BIM and achieving the level 2 targets by 2016. And I sort of, well, BIM seems like a new sort of area or a new discipline. I don't believe it is. I think it's just looking at the idea of metadata and provenance around building information models, or around CAD modelling. And what I've described as using some existing technologies from other disciplines to look at level 3 BIM as linked open data. And it might be that we have just taken a small part of it in terms of a classification system, but we've made an open, reusable classification repository. And we put this repository up on the web 3 weeks ago now, and it's had about 12,000 downloads and views. So it's not just me that's doing it. There is somebody else hopefully using it, although probably about 10,000 of them are me. And if you want to know some more about BIM, the BIM Task Group, the UK Government's BIM Task Group website is an extremely good resource to look at BIM and to look at a very good introduction to building information modelling. If you want to know a bit more about the open side of BIM and the open standards, then Building Smart is a very good place to look at. And if you want to know a bit more about the Uniclass system, then if you go to cpic.org.uk. Okay, thanks.
Because we also speak about archiving.
Yeah.
Do you think about that, or is
Yeah. Well.
Or are you just because you were saying pushing back to the?
Well, one of the things I think with I guess with building information modelling is that it is about recording how the data came into being, who's changed the data, when the data was changed, and these things are incredibly useful things to record. So part of the
Let's
thing.
say in 10 years.
Yeah. Well.
And then will you make sure for us, the archives and the collection organizations, that we can collect a project that is done in BIM in 2007 that we can still read and use and open it and so on?
Well, one of the things I think that, or one of my beliefs is that actually a building information model maybe doesn't contain the model or will not contain the model in future. The building information model will just be the configuration of data from disparate data sources. So you won't actually have the model as a massive sort of file. You'll have the configuration of all the different linked data sources. So the model will be that configuration of reusable data sources. So,
and that'll actually be the record of creation.
Yeah. So that becomes the.
See, because all those links are potentially going to be showing the different things that happen.
But I think that's probably one of the things it would be what you're looking at. That would be a problem because you don't really bring the data together into a central archive. You just in the archive of a level 3 building information model, I would say that you just have the metadata about where it is and how it's used and when it was accessed, where it was done.
Bill, what do you want to see?
Yeah, so there's a couple of issues to tease out here to answer your question in a variety of different ways, I think. And I don't know this material well, but thinking about the preservation of linked data and thinking of the preservation of the types of approach that you've laid out for us, 2 or 3 things come to mind. First of all, it means that responsibility for the management of the classification is properly delegated to people who manage that classification. So any updates and any changes to the system, for example, if you're needing to make an update to your system, it's your job to maintain that. Provided you maintain a change history, everyone's happy with that. So that's the number one observation. Second observation to make is it places a great deal of importance, therefore, on what you might broadly term persistent identifiers. So systems which resolve back to the right location, even though the URL may change. So this becomes part of an architecture for a digital preservation system. And any preservation system is going to need that persistent identifiers. And frankly, to be sustainable, it's also going to need that characteristic of delegating the right responsibility to the right people to maintain the right segments of the data set. Therefore, and thinking broadly about the linked data approach, I mean, the big diagrams, for example, of the kind of open linked data diagrams, which are, shove one of them up because they're great to look at, and I'll illustrate the point I'm going to make. Yeah, sure. Which is if we were to imagine an architecture for robustness in the long term. So if we were to imagine an architecture for robustness, this is about as robust as it could be because the right people are maintaining the right information. If we were to imagine an architecture for robustness in the long term, it would be hard to imagine anything more fragile than what you're looking at on the screen right there.
Yeah.
However, there's no problem here which can't be resolved by one simple additional step of indirection, which is to say that we don't necessarily actually have to have the answer to everything located within our archive. We just need to know who's looking after that stuff in order that we can resolve back to the right location. But let me observe that architectural in the computing sense, from the perspective of running a service like this, it challenges the archival profession, it challenges what we understand in terms of digital preservation. Because instead of thinking about repositories, and instead of having in our minds slightly obsolete concepts of the trusted digital repository, what we need here are sophisticated interconnected services which have a series of interdependencies between them. That is more complicated and slightly different from having to look after a series of files. It means having to look after a series of relationships in the long term.
Yeah.
And that will challenge our
elected
profession.
institutions still have their own unique identities.
Yes.
And no matter what, it's bringing us together, and the collaboration is absolutely essential, but that's also going to be a cultural shift from our perspective in this way.
So one of the things we had was that with the Uniclass system that we've got, Uniclass 2 has been developed because the original Uniclass system was a sort of snapshot of its time, and it didn't really evolve to meet the sort of new building information modeling protocols. So Uniclass 2 is meant to do that. But we have a really active sort of community of people who want to help update Uniclass and want to say that this term is classified wrongly, or this term is in the wrong place. But actually, one of the things we did realise was that, well, if you do start building your hospital or your school or your residential building, then the classification system still needs to have that snapshot that actually I don't want to come back and find that all my layer names have changed because from, I don't know, handrails to stairwells, you know, because of the classification system has evolved and moved about. So that's why we've had to look at almost the idea of it continuously evolves, but we still have to keep the snapshot of the classification system, but we're only keeping a snapshot of our specific little bubble of that classification system, and we're managing that. So if somebody else is linking to it, it's more on sort of, well, we try and preserve the links there as best we can.